As mentioned in last week's sermon, there are things in life that we cannot avoid. First, the inevitability of death, and second, the governments of men. Both of these can contribute much to the vanity or meaninglessness of life under the sun. But with the right kind of wisdom, Solomon says, we can endure the imperfect and often wicked governments of men. And we can also have joyful lives despite the certainty of death. Solomon in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 1 through chapter 11, verse 8, continues with wisdom to endure the meaninglessness of life. As we look at chapter 10, we see Solomon expounding upon the harm of folly. As dead flies give perfume a bad smell, so a little folly outweighs wisdom and honor. The heart of the wise inclines to the right, but the heart of the fool to the left. Even as he walks along the road, the fool lacks sense and shows everyone how stupid he is. Solomon deplores folly, foolishness. Folly mars the finest of reputations. The illustration is that you have an expensive perfume. Perfume smells good. But if a fly or other insect gets into that costly perfume, it greatly changes things, gives it a bad smell. In like manner, Solomon says, a little bit of foolishness can outweigh, can negate wisdom and honor. As influential as wisdom is, it remains vulnerable to the forces of folly. The reputation of the wise can easily be destroyed by one careless act of folly. Folly constitutes an unsafe guide. The heart of the fool is not in the right place. We have here the heart of the wise inclines to the right, the heart of the fool to the left. In ancient times, the right hand, what was to the right, spoke of strength, power, justice, but to the left spoke of perversion, incompetence, and weakness. Folly will eventually, invariably, betray its own stupidity. Even as that person walks down the road, even as that fool walks down the road, he will show everyone how stupid he is. In contrast, the wise person will be patient, steadfast, and conciliatory, even when opposed by those in authority. Notice verse 4. If a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post. Calmness can lay great errors to rest. Even if the government leader is against you, do your duty. Calmness can lay great errors to rest. Then Solomon says, folly often manifests itself in government, verses 7 through 19. Solomon has been observing. He says, I've observed everything around me. And Solomon had a good vantage point to do that as king of Israel. But he says, there is an evil I have seen under the sun, the sort of error that arises from a ruler. Fools are put in many high positions, while the rich occupy the low ones. I have seen slaves on horseback, while the princes go on foot like slaves. Solomon observed some things that didn't quite seem right. There was error proceeding from the ruler. And foolishness sometimes was exalted while the rich were debased. It seemed the natural order of things was for those who had the wealth to end up ruling. But Solomon sees this askew. Slaves riding on horseback while the princes walk on foot like slaves. This doesn't seem right to Solomon. Paul Earnhardt said, those ill-equipped to rule are elevated while those most likely to govern are kept out of office. And then Earnhardt continues, in spite of all the progress often ascribed to modern days, it appears at times that nothing has changed. Those who labor with foolishness hurt and hinder themselves. Verses 8 through 10. Whoever digs a pit may fall into it. Whoever breaks through a wall may be bitten by a snake. Whoever quarries stones may be injured by them. Whoever splits logs may be endangered by them. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. Those who labor with foolishness end up hurting themselves, hindering themselves. Solomon illustrates this with several examples. A person digs a pit. It is designed, most likely, to entrap animals or to entrap an enemy. But there's always a possibility that the person who digs the pit will fall into it themselves. One who breaks through a wall always faces the risk that there could be a snake there to bite him, because snakes like to dwell in the walls. When you quarry stone, there's a risk of a stone falling on you. When you split a log, there's a danger of a piece of it coming up and hitting you in the face. Solomon also says you need to be prepared. Wisdom will help prepare you in dealing with various situations. What happens if your axe is dull, if you haven't taken the time to sharpen it? It takes more strength to do the job, but Solomon says skill will bring success. The foolish seldom know how to restrain themselves. Verses 11 through 15. They do not know how to hold their tongues. They will talk whether they have anything worthwhile to say or not. And they do not know how to direct their labor. If a snake bites before it is charmed, there is no profit for the charmer. Words from a wise man's mouth are gracious, but a fool is consumed by his own lips. At the beginning his words are folly, at the end they are wicked madness, and the fool multiplies words. No one knows what is coming. Who can tell him what will happen after him? A fool's work wearies him. He does not know the way to town. Picture of the foolish person. They are lacking in good sense. That is why they are called fools. Being foolish, being unwise, does not keep you from talking. In fact, those who are foolish sometimes talk way too much. The wise person keeps his mouth shut. But woe to the land whose leaders are childish and feast in the morning, Solomon says. Their laziness results in broken down buildings. Verses 18 and 19. If a man is lazy, the rafters sag. If his hands are idle, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes life merry. But money is the answer for everything. There are those who are put in power who are foolish. They think that they need to feast first thing in the morning, not wait till the proper time. They don't attend to their duties, and so things fall apart. Verse 20 says, do not revile the king, even in your thoughts, or curse the rich in your bedroom. Because the bird of the air may carry your words, and a bird on the wing may report what you say. Be careful what you say. Solomon says, don't curse the king. Don't curse the rich. What you say will likely reach their ears. The bird on the wing may report what you say. We have a phrase we often use, a little bird told me. We live in a country where we are blessed to have the freedom of speech. And we have seen some really strong language going back and forth in the political arena this year. But if we study a little bit of history, we realize that throughout the history of our nation, this political rhetoric has been quite strong. Before television, before radio, there was the printed page. And if you look back to the 1800s, perhaps even earlier, to some of the cartoons, they were indeed ruthless. We are blessed to have that freedom. In Solomon's day, in many places, even in the world today, there are great consequences to cursing the king. Well, Solomon says, Yes, we have some problems from those who govern us. We have problems because there are those who rule who are foolish, who do not have wisdom. As in chapter 9, much of what Solomon says in chapter 10 pertains to how we endure the vanity of living under governments often ruled by wicked men. As he continues in chapter 11, we find Solomon describing the value of benevolence, verses 1 through 8 of chapter 11. First, there is an exhortation to benevolence. Cast your bread upon the waters, for after many days you will find it again. Give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. Generally, this is interpreted to apply to benevolence, doing good for others. There are some interpreters who would say, well, this is advice on engaging in commerce. It could go either way. I favor the view that it's speaking of doing good to others, that it is an exhortation to benevolence. Verses 1 and 2 are parallel. They encourage kindness and hospitality. The benefits of such benevolence are it provides a blessing for the future. Now, one does not do good to others in the expectation of receiving something in the future. That is not the motivation. But doing good can actually provide a blessing for when days are evil. Similar benefits of a benevolent spirit are described throughout the Bible. For instance, Proverbs 19:17, he who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward him for what he has done. Solomon gives further reasons to exercise benevolence in verses 3 through 8. If clouds are full of water, they pour rain upon the earth. Whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where it falls, there it will lie. Whoever watches the wind will not plant. Whoever looks at the clouds will not reap. As you do know the path of the wind, and you do not know the path of the wind, or how the body is formed in a mother's womb, so you cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and at evening let not your hands be idle, for you do not know which will succeed, whether this or that, or whether both will do equally well. Calamities, like rain, like windstorms, will come. We cannot stop the clouds full of rain from falling. Trees will fall wherever they fall. If we spend our time just watching and not doing, we will not sow and reap. If the farmer does not sow, he certainly will not reap. Those who have engaged in farming know that there are risks. There might be too much rain, there might not be enough rain, there could be a hailstorm that could destroy a crop. All kinds of things can happen. But they also know if they do not take the risk and sow the seed, that they will not have a harvest. Tommy South said, we cannot allow our focus to be on the negatives of life. We must carry on with life's plans, expecting setbacks, but believing that our effort will be rewarded. Solomon says there are things we cannot comprehend. He gives the way of the wind as an example. Now in our day, the weathermen can tell us a lot about the wind patterns, but even they cannot predict with 100% accuracy, sometimes far less. We have surrounding us now wind turbines. Some of them are now being tested. One of these days, they're going to start working. We'll be surrounded by twirling wind turbines. But even with all we understand about wind, there's so much that we don't. Solomon says there are just some things that you can't understand. And as he speaks of wind, he next makes that statement about the body being formed in a mother's womb. Another word for wind, spirit or breath. Solomon may be thinking of the breath and the life of a baby. Now, we know more today about the development of a baby than no doubt Solomon and his peers did. But there's still a lot of mystery, isn't there? Just how does life work? You can have all the answers of the scientists, the biologists, and all those who've studied how human life works. But there are still some things they don't know. We cannot understand the work of God, the maker of all things. We can know something about what God has done because God has told us what he has done. But we are limited in our knowledge because we are not God. Solomon says, just because you cannot comprehend God's working, don't restrict what you do. Don't restrict the good that you do. Dave Bland said, in light of the best human calculations, do not be afraid to take risk in life when it comes to fulfilling your responsibilities, and especially when it comes to performing deeds of kindness. In the presence of uncertainty, the wise person learns to adjust to the curves that life throws. Solomon says there will be days of darkness. It is great to be alive when one is well. But even if one lives many joyful days, they should know that evil days will come. However many years a man may live, let him enjoy them all, but let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything to come is meaningless. Now again, this is the view of life under the sun. Solomon in his observations has concluded that life under the sun, that life here on earth, really has a lot of vanity, a lot of meaninglessness, a lot of emptiness. He has given us hints of pointing to God as the solution for this meaninglessness. As he closes the book, it will become much clearer. We may not be able to escape the days of darkness in this life. Evil days are often brought on by governments of men. Evil days occur for which we have no explanation. But thanks to Solomon, we know how best to endure life's meaninglessness. We avoid making things worse through our own folly. We try to use wisdom. And we sow the seeds of benevolence that can help us later when the days are evil.